Now, how can we use what we've learnt from the factor theorem to actually solve these equations? So we know if we need to solve these things, we need to first factorise them, just like with quadratics, wherever possible. But to factorise them, we first need to find out what factors we have. And to do this, we'll just try a few values. Because the constant at the end is 6, we're probably looking at plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, and plus or minus 3 as possible options, or plus or minus 6 if you haven't found it by then. So if we start with x equals 1 and substitute it in, we're going to get 2 minus 1 minus 13 minus 6. That's not equal to 0, so x equals 1 is not a solution. Similarly, if we do x equals minus 1, we're going to get minus 1 cubed is minus 1, so you're going to get negative 2 minus 1. Minus 13 times minus 1 is plus 13 minus 6. A bit closer, but still not equal to 0. But as the negative is closer, I think I'm going to try x equals negative 2 next. So you're going to have 2 times negative 2 cubed minus negative 2 squared minus 13 times negative 2 minus 6. So that's going to be minus 16 minus 4 plus 26 minus 6. And that does equal 0. So x equals negative 2 is a solution. So x plus 2, because you need to set it equal to 0, is a factor. Now we know a factor, we can get involved in long division. So what you do is you put the thing you're dividing by, in this case x plus 2, order it with highest powers of x first, going down, and the thing we're dividing. And the first step is you take the highest power of x and divide it by the highest power of x. So 2x cubed divided by x gives us 2x squared. And then just like we did with the number, we're going to do 2x squared times x gives us 2x cubed, and 2x squared times 2 gives us 4x squared. But we need to subtract that. I'm putting it in brackets because we're subtracting both terms. So 2x cubed minus 2x cubed disappears. Then we've got minus x squared minus 4x squared. So that gives us minus 5x squared. And then we bring the next term down. Now we start all over again. Take the highest power of x, minus 5x squared, and divide by x. So that gives us minus 5x. And then minus 5x times x gives us minus 5x squared. And minus 5x times 2 gives us minus 10x. And we're going to subtract this to find the remainder. Minus 5x squared minus 5x squared disappears. Then we've got minus 13x minus 10x. So that becomes minus 13 plus 10, which is minus 3x. Now let's bring the next thing down, minus 6, and start again. So minus 3x divided by x gives us minus 3. Minus 3 times x is minus 3x. Minus 3 times 2 is minus 6. And then if we subtract minus 3x minus 3x is 0. and minus 6 minus minus 6 becomes minus 6 plus 6, which is 0. So that gives us a remainder of 0, which we'd expect because it's a factor. So we can now write this as x plus 2 times 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. We still, however, have a quadratic here, which we should be able to factorise further. Not always, but in this case we should be able to. So we're going to have 2x and x. Now negative 3, if we put that there, that's going to give us negative 6x and positive 1, so negative 6x plus x gives you negative 5x. But you can solve the quadratic any way you want. Now we've got our three factors. Remember, if we multiply things and get 0, then each bracket, there's a solution for each bracket equaling 0. So if x plus 2 equals 0, then x equals negative 2. We'd establish that. If 2x plus 1 equals 0, then 2x equals negative 1. So x equals negative 1 over 2. And finally, if x minus 3 equals 0, then x equals 3. And these are our three solutions. We were expecting three solutions because the highest power of x is cubed. So let's do one more example. So this time we want to find a factor first. I'm going to try x equals negative 2. To be honest, there's nothing wrong with using your calculator to find your first factor. But just to show, we got 4 times negative 2 cubed minus 13 times negative 2 plus 6. 4 times negative 8 is negative 32 plus 26 plus 6. That equals 0, therefore it's a factor. Now we know x minus 2 is x equals minus 2 is the solution, then x plus 2 is the factor. So now we're in a position where we can do the long division, but the trick here, and we need to remember that, is because we haven't got an x squared term here, we still need to put it in. So we put it in as 0 x squared, and then minus 13x plus 6. And now we're in a position where we can divide by x plus 2. So start with 4x cubed divided by x gives us 4x squared. 4x squared times x is 4x cubed. 4x squared times 2 is 8x squared. And now you can see when we subtract, this is why we needed the 0x squared, because the x cubed terms will cancel. But then you've got 0x squared minus 8x squared. So that's going to give you negative 8x squared. We couldn't have subtracted it from an x term because they're not like terms. Bring the negative 13x down and start again. So negative 8x squared divided by x gives us negative 8x. Negative 8x times x is negative 8x squared. Negative 8x times 2 is negative 16x, and we need to subtract that. X squared terms cancel out, and then we got minus 13x minus 16x. So minus 13 plus 16 gives you 3x plus 6. Start again. 3x divided by x gives you 3. 3 times x is 3x, 3 times 2 is 6, and when we subtract that, we get 0. So we can factorise it to x plus 2, and 4x squared minus 8x plus 3 equals 0. So now we'll solve it slightly differently. We know from the first bracket that x equals negative 2 is the solution. And from the second bracket, we know that 4x squared minus 8x plus 3 equals 0 as a solution. So let's try completing the square. Remember, before we complete the square, we need to make sure the x squared coefficient is 1. So we're going to divide through by 4. So we get x squared minus 2x plus 3 over 4 equals 0, because 0 divided by 4 is 0. And remember, completing the square, we take the x coefficient, not the x itself, half it, which gives us -1, square it, add it, subtract it. So this now gives us x minus 1 squared, and then we've got 3/4 minus 1, which gives us -1/4 equals 0. Now we take the quarter over, so you've got x minus 1 squared equals 1/4. Square root both sides, so x minus 1 equals, now the square root of 1/4 is 1/2, so plus or minus 1/2. So you can square root the top, which is 1, square root the bottom, which is 2, but don't forget the plus or minus. So x is going to be 1 plus or minus 1/2. So that's going to be x is 1.5 or x is 0.5. And don't forget the -2 that we saw before. Okay, so once you get to the quadratic, you can solve it by factorising or by completing the square or any other method that works.